that house up at the end of the road that nobody goes near? Well, let me tell you why they don't. Well, in the haunted house at the top of the hill, the spooks give around to test their skill. That stroke of 12 every night, the scene is such a frightful sight.
Welcome to the Club of Heroes.
Club of two this time.
Yeah, we're a club of two gentlemen. We're going to continue our discussion on horror comics, and by discussion I mean Professor Evan Arnold here is going to, yes, see him. You can't see him now, but he's adjusting his glasses in a very professor-like manner. He's going to ascend the dais and continue the lecture.
Sure.
So listen up, there will be a quiz.
And your everything counts on it. Or you could just get me a sixer, that works too. I'm very flexible that way.
Yeah, very prone to bribery. I've known this guy a while.
So I think last time we really kind of ended it when the code was implemented. And we kind of carried it from that point all the way back to what inspired horror comics originally to become kind of their own thing with pulp and kind of Penny Dreadful type stories.
The comics code, a tiny little stamp that's a big, big problem, I think, for the creativity and the creativity of the comic book industry.
Sure.
It kind of put everybody on a leash.
It's a real kick in the dick. I mean, not only that, but you can't really experiment. Well, you said creativity. You can't really experiment with new things when you have to worry about things selling just so you can continue paying everybody, and making money, staying in business. So I think that really stifled for a long time comic growth. You see a lot of focus on for national, later DC, the big three, Supes, Batman, Wonder Woman, later Flash becomes more important. Wonder Woman was kind of a big deal in the 50s still.
Yeah.
You don't really see it branching out to new ideas, and there's a lot of restriction. It's silly. I did talk a little bit about how William Gaines was asked to speak at one of these subcommittee hearings underneath.
This is a Senate subcommittee.
Yeah.
We must remind the audience, talking about comic books.
This was a big deal.
Yeah.
I know it's hard to believe. It's hard for me to believe.
Yeah.
But
the entire Red Scare is hard to believe. But to think there was such an emphasis on comic books that it made it this high in the courts.
It's astounding. So he went after Wortham, basically. And Wortham already gave his spiel about how comics were poisonous and all that stuff. And I read some minutes last time on the show, but there was something else I'd like to read. That's one of the statements that he made. Let me see here. I was the first publisher in the United States to publish horror comics. I am responsible. I started them. Which is not true. Actually, Erie started first, and he didn't come in the game until way later. But it was still a cool thing to say.
It was a spur of the moment.
Yeah.
He was getting fired up.
It was a good thing to say to lock their attention on him. I don't know whether or not he meant it to be,
Yeah.
Me did this.
Yeah.
But that's not neither here nor there anyway. And he started, he escalated into rhetorical questions from there, and he started asking the people there that were, listening to his testimony, are we afraid of our own children? Do we forget that they are citizens too and entitled to select what to read and do? And, it was...
Hold on, repeat that, because he's really taken him to task.
Yeah. He said, are we afraid of our own children? Do we forget that they are citizens too and entitled to select what to read and do?
I think it apply to today.
Yeah, honestly, just from reading this, Gaines was really ahead of his time. That was not very popular for anyone to think that in the 50s. Mm-hmm. Kids are kind of, they're like Dad Jr. They dress the same way, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're not really seen as individuals with wants and needs. And God forbid those needs include comics where there's a zombie in them.
They're ugly little burdens.
So, that was all good stuff, but they kind of pushed that aside. And one of the main focuses was that they wanted to know about a house ad that Gaines had been running in all his magazines, which was called "Are You a Red Dupe?" And it noted in his house ad that among the detractors of comic books was the communist newspaper, The Daily Worker, and And he had said something along the lines of, so the next time some joker gets up at a PTA meeting or starts jabbering about the naughty comic books at your local candy store, give him the once-over. We're not saying he's a communist. He may be a dupe. He may not even read the Daily Worker. It's just that he swallowed the red bait, hook, line, and sinker. So, this kind of irony or sarcasm would be totally lost on the crusading senators.
Yeah.
Games is, savvy enough to know that this whole thing's being pushed behind the giant HUAC.
HUAC being the HUAC?
Mm-hmm, HUAC, Joe McCarthy,
That's the House of Un-American
Activities Committee.
Okay, yeah.
Which is a scary name in of itself.
Yeah, it is.
So, when this happened in 1954, that's not going to work out, no matter how true it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so, he might have shot himself in the foot there, but I don't really think there would have been any way that he could have come out of that situation smelling like roses,
It's beautiful, though. He stuck to his guns, and those guns kind of shot him in the foot, like you said.
And if nothing else, it's great dramatic reading material looking back on it.
Yeah.
But this is, a non-issue now. No one gives a fuck about comics anymore. Well, at least...
Well, now it's kind of video games.
Yeah, that's the new evil.
TV. Yeah.
And pirating.
We don't know anything about pirating here at the Club of Heroes. See Club of Villains.
Yeah. They steal.
Yeah.
Those dicks. So let's see here. Yeah, the subcommittee condemned those materials offered for children's reading that fall below the American standard of decency by glorifying crime, horror, and sadism. And furthermore, in the notes that they disclosed in the subcommittee, they took a swipe at Gaines. They said something like, the tempter of children cannot excuse his attempts to gain personal control, personal wealth through disregard of cultural values by crying that the parents should have been more vigilant. Which is funny, because, that's...
This is all going on now.
Yeah.
Like, these same statements, these same back and forths are occurring now when people bring up violent video games after a school shooting or anything like that.
This is so topical. The only thing that's changed is the material in question. And they went on to say that this vigilance would not have been necessary. The persons responsible for producing and distributing comic books have exercised that measure of self-restraint and common decency with which the American people have a right to expect from an industry aiming its projects so largely at the young and impressionable minds of our children. So, that sounds like every argument ever for restraining the industry as far as with a ratings board or what is appropriate,
music,
what isn't.
You think of
Tipper
Gore.
Parental advisory sticker.
Yeah.
That I've ever heard, ever, in the history of ever. So it's really interesting that they took the same kind of stance against Gaines in the 50s. In all honesty, though, as long as you gave a reprint of a Tales or, a horror comic, an EC comic, to a kid, I don't think it's going to scar them for life.
No, and, I think part of being a kid is exposing yourself to things that maybe you're not ready for.
Yeah, I'll agree with that.
If that makes any sense, like, you're going to see, especially in, our day and age, you're going to see explicit violence or sexual content long before your parents would ever desire you to see it, right?
Right.
Like, comic books, well, now they're kind of neutered. They're kind of, but in comic books back then, these kids would see these horrible stories, and I think, like you said about your own father, it expanded his literacy. It gave him a drive to read. And, if there's this lurid content that is a bait to get a child into something they might not otherwise be interested in, like reading, that's, I think it's for the better, like you said, it's not going to scar a kid for life reading one of these EC comics, It might give them some nightmares or whatever,
sure.
Some night willies, if you will. But I just, who is that parent, that is that worried? I can't imagine.
That's the difference between letting your kid grow or just atrophy.
Yeah.
I've seen kids that have been like...
Treating your kid like veal.
Right. Yeah, I've seen, I guess I really shouldn't say kids, I should say, adults, because they're my age.
Yeah.
I'm 23 and still reading comics. God help me. And
I'm a big kid.
and they act like they have like, it's like they have the mentality of a 13-year-old. It's not that they're stupid. It's just that they just they've been so held in by and love smothered, I guess is the best way to put it, that they can't handle anything.
This might be reaching a little bit. There's that kid, in high school, it might have been homeschooled, who was really sheltered or whatever.
Yeah.
And this isn't a dig at you.
I know.
Anything like that. I mean, like, that kid who is super sheltered in high school is usually the kid who parties the hardest when they go to college.
Exactly.
Because they aren't indoctrinated into that world of excess and everything that comes with the, party lifestyle. That when they're finally let off the leash, they just go off the deep end. And it's those kids who have those or rougher high school years who sometimes are a little more well-adjusted by the time they're, like our age.
Yeah, I mean,
That's me playing fucking child psychologist with no qualifications whatsoever, but my feelings on
we
it.
will not diagnose you. Chloe Hears is not practiced there.
I totally will, though. In a private setting, I will diagnose you. Yeah.
So yeah, that was basically the thought of the day, I guess, is that you need to protect not just kids but the American public as a whole from the menace of these comic books. I mean, this was the Kill Bill, the Evil Dead, or the
Marilyn Manson.
Yeah, of their day.
Yeah.
And it's crazy that they're so reviled when you really sit down and read one. I mean. But anyway, I mean, between this and public sentiment and wanting an easy scapegoat for what was wrong with their children, quote unquote, horror comics got buried.
So Gaines is eventually going to lose this fight.
Yeah.
The code is going to be implemented. The evil little stamp is going to be on every comic book cover. Actually, it's a pretty big fucking stamp at this point. It gets smaller as time goes on. But we touched on this before, but refresh me. Did EC just go quietly into the night, or did?
Actually, he struggled. I believe I read that he had to buy back all of his horror comic stock, which was very destructive. I mean, he made a great deal of money. When you make a great deal of money and something like this happens, you produce a lot of comics. And you produce a lot of comics, you have to buy all of them back from distributors and pay for shipping. At the end of the day, that's going to
that sales momentum
turned
in on itself. Yeah.
So, what happened was, after the Tales from the Crypt, Haunt of Fear, Vault, Witch Hunt occurred, Gaines closed down all of his new trend titles except for one book, Mad. Mm-hmm. He kept Mad. And that was done across the board, whether or not they attracted, official resentment or aggression. He just couldn't afford it. I think he knew that this was coming, because by 1953, a year before this happened, he'd already discontinued Frontline Combat, his big war book. So he was already prepping for something like this to happen.
It's a damn shame, because war books were really in vogue in the following period in the Silver Age. They maintained a strong following. And
they did. And
by my observation.
If you go back and read them, they're actually really good stories. Mm-hmm. It's not like fucking... I don't know.
War comics are some of the strongest, most emotionally impactful material in all of comic book history, in my opinion. Because they're very personal, and the people who made war comics, unlike the people who would go on to, make fantastic things like Spider-Man and like Fantastic Four or whatever, war comics have a personal bend that I think the other genres just don't. Because we have a generation of veterans making war comics. And I get a little misty just thinking about it. Like, it's crazy.
I mean, obviously it was an EC production, so it wasn't, something like Young Allies or something like that.
This was not that.
It was pretty gritty stuff. And
more akin to, like DC would later have, like, Our Army